What if everything you thought was safe in the cloud wasn't? Welcome back to Token Drop, your daily hit of the most important AI and tech news delivered fast and straight. I'm your host. Today is April 2nd, 2026, and this week the tech world didn't just have a bad news cycle, it had a war. Literally. Let's get into it. Iran just turned the cloud into a war zone. Here's something nobody in Silicon Valley was prepared to say out loud. A foreign military has physically destroyed American cloud infrastructure. Not hacked it, not DDoSed it, destroyed it with drones. Let's rewind to March 1st, 2026. Before dawn, Iranian Shahed drones, the same kind used against Ukraine, struck two Amazon Web Services data centers in the United Arab Emirates. A third AWS facility in Bahrain was also hit. Buildings were damaged, power went down, fires broke out, and in a matter of hours, banking apps, payments platforms, delivery services, and enterprise software across the entire Gulf region went dark. This was not a simulation. This was not a cyber attack. This was a kinetic military strike against commercial cloud infrastructure, and it's the first time in history that has ever happened. For years, the tech industry talked about the cloud like it was some kind of ethereal, untouchable thing floating above us. Turns out, the cloud has an address, and that address can be hit by a drone. Now let's talk about what Iran said after the attack, because this is where things get even more alarming. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Corps, the IRGC, claimed that these data centers were supporting what they called the enemy's military and intelligence activities. And 10 days after the initial strike, an Iranian news agency went further, declaring that major tech company data centers and other physical assets across the region were now considered, quote, enemy technology infrastructure. That is not vague. That is a target list. And sure enough, on March 12th, the IRGC published an explicit list of 17 American companies it considers legitimate military targets. We're talking about the biggest names in tech: Cisco, HP, Intel, Oracle, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Meta, IBM, Dell, Palantir, NVIDIA, JP Morgan Chase, Tesla, GE, Boeing, Inspire Solutions, plus the UAE-based AI company G42. The IRGC said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that American information and AI companies are the main element in designing and tracking U.S. military operations against Iran. Now here's where the AI angle gets really wild. Multiple news organizations reported that the U.S. military was using Anthropic's AI model Claude, which runs on AWS infrastructure, for intelligence assessments, target identification, and battle simulations during the strikes in Iran. So it's not just that Iran was hitting Amazon servers, they were potentially targeting the actual AI systems being used to coordinate the military campaign against them. Think about that for a second. And then on April 1st, just yesterday, Iran followed through. AWS infrastructure in Bahrain was struck again. Bahrain's Interior Ministry confirmed a fire broke out at a company facility following an Iranian attack, with civil defense teams responding to the scene. Amazon has not yet publicly commented. The British Embassy in Saudi Arabia has now warned its nationals to avoid U.S.-linked businesses in facilities in the country. That's how serious this has become. Here's the bigger picture that makes this so significant for the AI industry specifically. The Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, was supposed to become the third global center for artificial intelligence, alongside the US and China. Just last year, during Trump's tour of the region, over $2 trillion in investment pledges were made. Amazon committed $5 billion to an AI hub in Riyadh. OPENAI and NVIDIA announced plans for the Stargate UAE campus in Abu Dhabi, what would have been the largest AI facility outside the United States. All of that now sits in a conflict zone. As one analyst from the Carnegie International Peace Institute put it, physical attacks on data centers are only going to become more common as AI becomes more and more significant. Suddenly, protecting data centers is like protecting top security government offices. The cloud was never really in the sky, it was always on the ground. And right now, the ground is burning.
And hey, if you're finding this valuable, do us a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to know what's happening in AI and tech. This stuff is moving fast, and the people around you deserve to be in the loop too. All right, we're just getting started. Let's keep going.
Welcome back. If Part 1 gave you existential dread about the physical future of AI infrastructure, Part 2 is about the financial and legal chaos happening right at the top of the AI industry. Because while the Middle East was literally on fire, two massive stories dropped that could reshape who runs the AI race and whether the current leaders can hold on. OpenAI raises $122 billion. Yes, billion. Let's start with the number, because the number is genuinely staggering. OpenAI has officially closed the largest private funding round in the history of venture capital, $122 billion. That's more than the GDP of most countries. That's more money than NASA has received in the last decade. And it pushes OpenAI's valuation to $852 billion, putting it within striking distance of becoming the world's first trillion-dollar private company. For context, when ChatGPT launched in late 2022, OpenAI was valued at around $20 billion. In less than 4 years, that number has grown more than 40 times over. So where's this money going? OpenAI says it's going toward chips, data centers, and talent, the three things you need to win the AI race. The company's also using this round as a runway to prepare for a public listing, which analysts are now predicting could come as early as late 2026, targeting a valuation close to $1 trillion. And the competitive picture explains why investors are still willing to write checks at this scale. OpenAI is now generating over $2 billion in revenue every single month. That's more than $25 billion annually. Anthropic, their closest rival, is approaching $19 billion in annualized revenue. These are no longer maybe someday profitable moonshot companies. They are, right now, among the fastest-growing software businesses ever built. But here's the part of the OpenAI story that the press release doesn't mention. The company is burning through money at a rate that is almost hard to comprehend. Internal projections show $14 billion in losses for 2026 alone. Cumulative losses through 2029 are expected to reach $115 billion. The path to profitability isn't expected until sometime in the 2030s. And the competition is only getting more brutal. ChatGPT's share of global AI web traffic dropped from nearly 87% in January 2025 to about 65% in January 2026, a massive slide in just 12 months. Google Gemini grabbed most of that ground. Anthropic is eating into OpenAI's enterprise customers, and Chinese open-source models are making it increasingly difficult to charge premium prices. So yes, $122 billion is an almost incomprehensible amount of money, but in the AI race, it might just barely be enough to stay in the game. Now, let's talk about the AI company that has been growing fastest in the search space and just got hit with a lawsuit that could change how the entire industry thinks about user privacy. On April 1st, and no, this was not an April Fool's joke, Perplexity AI was sued in federal court in San Francisco. The plaintiff is a Utah man filing on behalf of a proposed class action, and the allegations are serious. According to the complaint, Perplexity secretly embedded tracking software into its search engine code that automatically sends users' conversations to Meta and Google without those users' knowledge or consent. And here's the detail that really stands out. The complaint says these trackers activated login, even if you're using incognito mode, even if you think you're browsing privately. The lawsuit also names Meta and Google directly, alleging they received this data and used it for targeted advertising. The complaint claims Perplexity violated California privacy laws as well as state and federal computer fraud statutes. This isn't Perplexity's first legal headache. Earlier this year, a federal judge in San Francisco issued a preliminary injunction blocking Perplexity from using its AI agent to crawl password-protected areas of Amazon's website. Amazon also has a separate active lawsuit against the company over its Buy with Pro e-commerce feature.
But this new case is different in scale and implication, because Perplexity isn't a small startup anymore. The company crossed 1 billion monthly queries in the first quarter of 2026. That's 1 billion searches, 1 billion conversations. It closed a $400 million Series E at a $24 billion valuation. It even made a bid to acquire Google Chrome for $38 billion. And if the allegations in this lawsuit are true, all of those conversations, all of those searches may have quietly been handed to the two biggest advertising companies on the planet. Perplexity has denied being served with the lawsuit, but whether they fight it or settle, this case just became a flashpoint for the entire AI industry. Because Perplexity isn't a small startup anymore. If the most celebrated AI startup in the world was allegedly doing this, the question becomes, who else?
Welcome to Part 3. We've talked about physical warfare targeting AI infrastructure. We've talked about the biggest funding round in history and a privacy scandal that could shake user trust across the industry. But we saved the most dramatic story for last. Because in just 25 days, the most consequential tech trial in a generation begins, and the man who helped create the most powerful AI company on Earth is now trying to destroy it. Elon Musk versus OpenAI. The trial starts April 27, 2026. Oakland, California. Elon Musk, one of the original co-founders of OpenAI, the man who wrote some of the earliest checks, is taking Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, and Microsoft to trial for fraud. He's seeking damages of up to $135 billion. If you think that number sounds insane, here's the argument behind it. Musk's legal team contends that he backed OpenAI on the explicit condition that it would remain a non-profit, dedicated to developing AI for the benefit of humanity, not for profit. And he says that Sam Altman and Greg Brockman privately planned from very early on to convert the company into a for-profit entity regardless of what they promised. In October 2025, OpenAI officially converted to a for-profit public benefit corporation. Musk filed suit, and the case went to discovery, where lawyers subpoenaed internal emails, text messages, and private documents. What they found was explosive. A federal judge on January 15th of this year ruled that the case would proceed to trial, and in her ruling she pointed directly to Greg Brockman's personal diary entries from 2017, entries in which the co-founder of OpenAI wrote in his own handwriting that he could not honestly say the company was committed to its nonprofit mission and that converting without Musk's agreement would be, quote, pretty morally bankrupt. There were also Sam Altman emails, Satya Nadella texts, dozens of internal communications showing, according to the judge, that OpenAI's leadership was saying one thing publicly and planning something very different privately. The judge found ample evidence supporting Musk's fraud claims. That's the legal standard for sending a case to a jury. And now a jury of regular people is going to read those diary entries in those text messages and decide whether ChatGPT was built on a broken promise. Now, let's be clear about what's at stake here, because it goes way beyond Elon Musk's personal grievance. OpenAI is planning an IPO later this year, targeting a valuation close to $1 trillion. A fraud verdict, or even sustained negative headlines from the trial, could torpedo that timeline and spook investors who are already nervous about the company's path to profitability. OpenAI's largest shareholder, Microsoft, which invested $13 billion into the company and built Azure's entire AI strategy around their partnership, is reportedly considering its own legal action over an alleged breach of contract. That's Microsoft and Musk squeezing OpenAI from two sides simultaneously. And internally, the company has been leaking talent for months. OpenAI engineers are statistically 8 times more likely to leave for Anthropic than the reverse. The CTO left, multiple co-founders have departed, the safety team has been gutted. At the very moment OpenAI needs to project strength and stability ahead of a historic IPO, its former co-founder is in a courtroom arguing that the entire company was founded on a lie. Settlement is still possible. Legal experts put the odds at somewhere between 50 and 60%.
But even a settlement at this scale would be one of the largest in tech history and would require OpenAI to acknowledge that something went wrong in its early years. April 27th is not far away, and when those courtroom doors open, the AI industry will be watching, because the verdict won't just determine what Elon Musk gets paid. It will determine whether the most powerful AI company in the world can survive the weight of its own origin story. So, that's your token drop for today. Let's recap what we covered. Iran physically struck Amazon's cloud data centers in the UAE and Bahrain and followed through on threats to target 18 American tech giants, including Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Nvidia. The AI industry's $2 trillion Middle East expansion is now inside an active conflict zone. OpenAI closed a record-breaking $122 billion funding round, pushing its valuation to $852 billion and setting the stage for a $1 trillion IPO, but the company is burning $14 billion annually and losing market share fast. Perplexity AI was hit with a class action lawsuit alleging it secretly forwarded user conversations to Meta and Google using hidden trackers, even in incognito mode. And in 25 days, Elon Musk goes to trial against Sam Altman in what could be the most consequential legal battle in the history of AI. The AI race has never been more intense or more chaotic. If you want to stay ahead of it, you know where to find us. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, tell me which story hit hardest today. I'll see you tomorrow on Token Drop.